Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so pleased to welcome you to Bloodwater's second webinar session for this calendar year on opportunities to address gender issues in WASH and HIV programs. This session will be recorded to enable you and your teams and other members who are not present today to access this session on demand beyond this afternoon. I want to welcome all of our core partners who are participating today. We have registered on the participation list. Every organization is supposed to be represented, so we're anticipating a full house. I am putting everyone's organization in the chat just as a collective welcome. And I also want to introduce some new organizations representing another part of our community in the pipeline. This is the first session where we are enabling access to our learning opportunities for vetted partners who are not yet in the partnership portfolio. So these are vetted partners that are in the future pipeline for engagement as a core partner. So welcome existing, welcome new partners, and you will have an opportunity to get to know one another a little bit in the breakout sessions this afternoon. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Betty Adera. Betty is an international development and public health specialist. She has over 20 years hands-on experience in advocacy and application of rights-based approaches in the design and management of health systems, social behavior change, gender and development, and peace building. She is the founder and chief executive at Betty Adera Foundation International and has previously held senior management portfolios in a number of international NGOs in Tanzania, Ethiopia, Malawi, Mozambique, Ghana, and Nigeria. She holds a Master's of Science in Public Health from the University of the Western Cape in South Africa, a postgraduate diploma in Children, Youth, and Development from Erasmus University Institute of Social Studies at The Hague in the Netherlands, and a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work from the University of Nairobi. She is also currently pursuing her PhD in Global Public Health, specializing in adolescent sexual reproductive health and rights, and a postgraduate diploma in diplomacy and international law. Betty, you put many of us to shame. Welcome, we're so excited to have you today, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for that wonderful and humbling introduction. It's an honor to engage with Bloodwater, and it is an even deeper honor for me to speak today to folks who are doing, what needs to be done in the world of WASH and in the world of HIV and AIDS. Like you correctly say, my over 20-something years in public health work has been in the field of these two areas, WASH as well as HIV and AIDS. And those kinds of programming, have actually made me to be who I am, today. I have learned through it. I have gone through it. I have risen the ranks, and now I feel it's time to now share 22 years worth of, experience with organizations who would benefit from that kind of knowledge and experience. And of course, today, as we go ahead and speak about gender and just how gender interacts within the mix, of HIV and AIDS is super critical, because it is easy for programmers, to assume that gender issues will just fall in place by themselves. No, they don't. They have to be made to fall in place. And secondly, it is also easy for programmers to bring into programming their own biases, their own understanding, their own gender perhaps misconceptions into, programming. And I'm thinking that for Bloodwater to set time for all of us, to have a conversation around gender and how it interacts, and some of the considerations that need to be put in place for WASH and HIV programs, I think that is brilliant, and that is also timely. And timely more so because even now we are within the COVID-19 pandemic context, and we know just how water, is integral, hand washing all the time, is integral to containing, this pandemic, but we also appreciate that COVID-19 is also exacerbating HIV infections more than before. So all these components and all these concepts are actually intertwined, and we're going to unpack those. So I have a presentation that I will share. So if you allow me, I'm gonna share my screen right now, and just let me know if you can see it. Okay, so the screen is up, but as we are moving into talking about this, I have a couple of slides. I might move a little faster in the interest of time, but in case there's any need for further clarification or a question, feel free to make use of the chat section, because Nadia will help me to keep an eye on it in case there's anything that we need to address. And at some periodically, I'll be stopping and pausing just to check our temperatures on how we're moving forward. And then I also want to place a disclaimer at this point that if you see me using the concept health, I mean both WASH and HIV. If you see me using WASH, that place where I have used WASH, you can put in HIV and vice versa, because the concepts are actually the same. At some point, we are going to get into a little group work, also to give you an opportunity to know one another, but to try and see ways in which we can unpack some of the concepts that we're going to talk about here. And then towards the end, I will share just one tool that could help you in your practical quest to figure out ways in which you can integrate gender into your programming. So without much ado, I'm gonna start right now. So now my screen is not moving. I'm having trouble moving my screen. Okay, it's moving now. So when we got the email from Nadia to attend this webinar and the announcement for it, I'm just curious, sort of like what sort of came to your mind in terms of what are some of the expectations you are having. If you could just quickly put it on the chat in terms of what your expectations were, that would be helpful. We can take a minute or two just to get that done, because sometimes it's important to get to know what people's expectations were, so that at the end of this webinar, we can come back and just try and see if we actually met the expectations of participants. All right, so perhaps if I could ask Nadia to unmute herself and just share with me some of them. I'm realizing that if I'm sharing my screen, I can't access the chat portal.
We have one participant who has said to deeply understand the relationship between HIV, WASH, and gender-based violence. Another has said to walk away with an understanding of gaps in our current programs based on the information shared with respect to gender integration.
Thank you. All right. Those are critical expectations, and mainly part of why we are here, because like I said earlier, the concept of gender intertwines very closely within the programming of WASH as well as HIV. So I'll move forward, and my screen is not moving. Okay, allow me to use it in this format, because if I put it on presentation mode. I somehow can't move the slides. So thank you for those who have shared their expectations, and you can continue writing them on the chat. We'll be checking on the chat intermittently as we proceed. So the main objectives of this webinar today is to work with you to build a common understanding of gender and gender-related concepts, because there's quite a ton of concepts there that are sometimes interchangeably used. And in most cases, you find them rather confusing as well. So we want to take time and just unpack some of those concepts that would be relevant for your work in WASH, as well as your work in HIV and AIDS programming. You also want to take time to understand the rationales. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Why should we even talk about gender considerations and mainstreaming for WASH and HIV programs? And this is where we are going to talk also about the convergence of WASH, HIV, and gender, and gender, as someone had already said, is one of their expectations. Third, we're going to get to know how to identify, how to respond, and how to analyze, gender issues as they emerge within your projects. We're going to pause at some point and ask the questions, just trying to see very quickly, where are you with gender issues, gender mainstreaming, gender integration within your programs, and what is your trajectory looking like? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to eventually end? And lastly, of course, share experiences and key learnings, as we'll be discussing throughout the process. And we also encourage you to all use the chat section if something pops up in your head as a critical experience, something you want to share, something you have learned, something you've experienced as a challenge or a barrier, and if in any case you have figured out a way to get past it. So then the question is, what is gender? What is gender? We all have our own understanding, of gender. People walking on the road understand gender in their own way. Men have a way of understanding gender. Women generally have a way of understanding gender. So again, I'll pose the question very, very quickly. What is your understanding of gender? If you hear the word gender, what comes into your mind? So again, could you just make a point of jotting down something very quickly in the chat session so that we can get to see your understanding of gender? And even more importantly, what you hear people say gender is when they come to your office or when you're in your trainings, and you also pose this question to them, what do they say? So maybe we can just take a minute or two, and Nadia, if you could help me with that as well.
Sure. I would say feel free to unmute yourself to contribute. So don't worry about taking time to type in the chat, only put questions in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadia, for saying that. Yes, you can unmute very quickly and just say, what is gender? What do you hear people say gender is within the communities?
Do you want to unmute yourself and share your chat contribution?
I can see Sylvia laughing. Sylvia, what is gender? Something has tickled you.
I've just written it down in the chat box.
Okay, now that you're unmuted, could you share it with us?
I've said it is the biological difference in a being.
Gender is the biological difference in a human being. Thank you, Sylvia.
Yes.
Anything else on the chat? I want to move forward.
Yes, Rosalind, please share what you've typed.
Okay, I've just written it describes or female.
Gender is being male or female. Okay. Personally, when I go out into the community and I pose this question. Okay, meaning that gender is women. So when you want women to be in the room, it's coming. So that's something I keep hearing out there. But anyway, let's move ahead and just see what some of the key concepts mean. Like I said earlier, there are a number of concepts within the gender world, and we can take a whole day just trying to unpack them. But I kind of selected just a few that I thought would be relevant to the work that you do at the community level, especially in the field of WASH, in the field of HIV and AIDS programming. So yes, what is gender? If you look at the screen, it says, this refers to the economic, social, political, and cultural attributes and opportunities that is associated to being man or woman, or to being male or female. It also refers to the socially constructed definitions of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And it varies from culture to culture, context to context, country to country, tribe to tribe, and it can also change over time. So going back to the thought that gender means being male or female, that's the difference between gender and sex. When you talk about sex, is when you bring in the biological aspects of being woman and being being man. Biological in the sense that women give birth, they have breasts, they menstruate, and so on and so forth. And biological for men meaning they grow beard, they, you know, their shoulders become, you know, broad, they have sperms that they want to impregnate women, and so on and so forth. Gender, however, is the cultural and social understanding constructed of what it means to be a man or to be a woman. For instance, it would mean in some context that if you're a woman, automatically your place is in the kitchen. Now that becomes gender. If you're a man in some context, automatically it means you should be the provider. Everyone sits down and wait for you to provide, right? So that is the aspect of gender. And what is key is that it is not the same everywhere. Every place, every culture, every context has its own definition of what it means to be a man, not being a man, what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a woman, and it changes over time. Let's look at gender norms. These are the rules, sort of like guiding principles or rules, you know, and shared social expectations that distinguish expected behavior on the basis of being either male or being female. There's a gender norm, for example, that can say, as a man, it is not expected of you to cry. You know, that's a gender norm. A gender norm would also be, as a man, you're expected to be masculine. You know, have sex with any woman you come across, because that is what it means to be. That is the norm. That is what is expected of you. All right. So those are gender norms. They're like informal rules. It's not written anywhere. But if you subscribe to that culture, to that context, to that particular community, then as a man or a woman, you are expected to behave, you know, according to some unwritten informal rules. You're expected even in some cases for a man to beat your wife. You know, that's a norm. Men who don't beat their wives, you know, are considered weak, are considered to be like the woman is overpowering you, and so on and so forth. So that is the concept of gender. Now, gender equity, it's now getting tougher. Gender equity refers to the process of being fair to someone regardless of their sex or gender. And when you hear the word sex, we're talking about the biological aspects. If you hear gender, remember we're talking about the socio-cultural expectations, all right? To ensure fairness, you know, measures must be taken to compensate for cumulative economic, social, political disadvantages of either men or women that prevent them from operating on a level playing field. For example, if there is entry into the universities, just an example, and girls or female students, their pass mark is lower compared to that of boys and men. That is a component of gender equity, so that more girls can enroll in order to catch up. So it's a sense of fairness. And another example can also be, for instance, if you're looking at, in some cases, compensation, there are some places where women are paid more and they're doing the same work as the man, but just because of realization that they have greater responsibilities of childbearing, back at home. These are just examples. So just trying to do things in a fair way to bring fairness for the gender, whether it is male or female, who is disadvantaged for the thing that you want to do, right? Now, if we move on, we've looked at gender equity. So let's look at gender equality. Now, here is where many people get it wrong, especially in programming. Gender equality doesn't necessarily mean that men and women need to be the same, but it refers to the concept that all human beings, male, female, regardless of their sex or gender identity, are free to develop their personal abilities and make choices without limitations set by stereotypes, rigid gender rules, or discrimination. So here we are talking about equality in opportunity. If there's a company that is recruiting 20 people, gender equality means bring 10 men, bring 10 women. That is equality in the opportunity. In Kenya now, for the longest time, we've been talking about the gender bill in parliament. The gender equality aspect of it would then mean that if there are 10 men, there should also be 10 women. That is the equality in opportunity. If all children need to go to school as provided for by law, then of all of them, all girls, all boys need to have the same opportunity, to access that particular service. So that is the gender equality. Gender gap. Now, gender gap is critical because if you want to, beyond this webinar, to go back and just look at how you're doing, it refers to the measure of gender inequality, like the opposite of gender equality, right? It is just a way of you measuring. So to what extent are you not being equal to either men or women? Because remember, gender is not women, it is not men either. It is the roles that are ascribed to being male or female by a particular community or a particular context. So a gender gap, between boys and girls can be like in health outcomes, in educational levels, in labor and income, and so on. So where is the gap? Where is one gender doing better than another? In education, for instance, are we getting more male graduates than female? If the answer is yes, then that's a gender gap on the part of females. If it's the other way around, it is still a gender gap on the part of females. Now, gender bias, this now it's getting interesting. Gender bias refers to the tendency to make decisions or take actions based on preconceived notions of capability according to gender. Remember, we all don't live in isolation. We all subscribe to some country, to some culture, to some norms, cultural norms, or even gender norms from wherever we come from, or however we have been brought up. So gender bias is sometimes an example. You want to recruit a program manager, but you, the recruiter, you're already telling yourself, based on your own perception and your own upbringing and your own socialization, that no, a manager can only be a man. So even if women apply, the CV of a woman, you just put it aside, because you're already biased, based on a preconceived notion on capability. That is just an example. Now, someone asked about gender-based violence, acronymed as GBV. GBV is another topic, Nadia. We need to have another webinar just on GBV only. But it refers to the physical, sexual, psychological abuse, threats, coercion, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, economic deprivation, whether occurring in public, or in private. If a husband refuses his wife to go and work outside, and that is what she wants to do, that is gender-based violence. So violence is not only the physical domestic fight of a woman has been beaten up by her husband, or a husband has been beaten up by a woman, or the rape cases that we see, or the genocides that the femicide, sorry, that we see. It goes deeper, much deeper than that. And remember, it is covered between whether it happens in public or whether it happens in private. So this is the last slide in terms of concepts. We're still just laying the ground and unpacking some of the key issues, agenda concepts that would be relevant for us to get past this topic. So there's this gender integration, right? What is gender integration? This refers to strategies applied in programmatic design, implementation, M&D, to take gender considerations into account and compensate for gender-based inequalities. For instance, if you want to do gender integration in M&E, just an example, then you need to break down your data in terms of men, women, boys, girls. That way, you'll be able to see how many boys, men are you reaching versus girls, women are you reaching, vis-a-vis what you actually intended to do, in a particular program. Gender integration and gender mainstreaming in some cases is used interchangeably, because gender as a concept in itself cannot stand on its own. But integration just means that to what extent are you aware of and doing something about ensuring that no gender is suffering in the process of you implementing your work. The other concept is gender transformation. Gender transformation. If your organization can move itself to a place where it is called a gender transformative organization, that would be like the gold standard. So it refers to efforts to change gender and social norms to address inequalities in power and privilege between men and women in order for them, to protect them from harmful norms. I'm sorry, there's a typo there. So transformation just means that you have done things in such a way to bring the men and the women on the same page, on the same platform, so that they can engage as equal, right? Not that when you're going out to the community, women are sitting on the ground and men are sitting on the chairs, So for you to get to the transformation phase, it means you've broken all barriers and you're facilitating, or supporting the men and the women to look at each other, as equals, and having equal roles and equal benefits from whatever it is, that is being done. The other concept is called gender blind. This is critical. There are many organizations or people who are gender blind without necessarily even realizing it. So this refers to lack of consideration on how gender norms and unequal power relations affect the achievement of your goals and of your programmatic objectives. You got donor funding, you want to implement a program for 1 year, you're burying your head in the sand, you're implementing, you're not pausing to ask your question, by the way, to what extent, are the inequalities experienced by men, between men and women being addressed, as you implement your program. So if you don't take those gender considerations into play within your programming, then you are referred to as being gender blind. And lastly, being gender aware. There's a difference between being gender aware and being gender blind. So being gender aware is more like just the opposite of being gender blind. So it refers to the deliberate examination and mitigation of anticipated gender-related outcomes, during program design, implementation, and I'll also add monitoring, evaluation, learning, and reporting. So to what extent are you deliberate at bringing up the gender aspects in everything you do? How is it impacting men in comparison to women? How is it impacting boys in comparison to girls? So if I move to this next slide, then we ask the question, why does this all matter? Somebody asked, where is the intersection between HIV, WASH, and gender? So what? Why are we really here? Why do we need to talk about, gender considerations in the program? So why does it matter? It matters because gender is a cross-cutting and fundamental social determinant of health. that interacts with everything else, all right? It interacts with everything else. It interacts with all other socio-political, socio-cultural, socio-environmental determinants, such as race, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, etc. You know, that can hinder or can foster development of all of outcomes in all fields. So gender consideration is just that critical. You cannot say your program is successful if you are gender blind and if you have not done things and moved yourself to the gender transformative. Gender matters because inequalities that are based on gender and other determinants are serious obstacles to health and must be addressed. If there's a gender barrier to a person living with HIV accessing his or her medications, then that's a problem, right? If there's a gender, if there's an inequality, you know, that is stopping a woman or a girl from accessing water, for instance, from some place, then that in itself is a serious obstacle to health. So gender is that crucial. So gender matters also because societal expectations and patriarchal structures influence relationships and interactions between men and women, regardless of the field you are in. Even if you're doing an engineering project, you have to make considerations of gender and figure out ways in which the community's understanding of gender will influence the outcome of the project that you are implementing. So gender also matters because the expectations and structures also influence the women and girls' ability, you know, to exercise control and make choices. Now here I just picked, you know, women and girls specifically and purposely because if we are talking about HIV and AIDS programming, this is critical. If you're talking about vulnerabilities too, issues such as gender-based violence, this is critical. We must look at the structures and the norms, you know, that would make it easy or difficult for women and girls to exercise control and make choices about their lives and how they want to run their lives and run their families. Lastly, gender also matters because by addressing gender issues, health programs, be it HIV, be it WASH, be it non-communicable diseases, be it anything, health program and support services, you know, can greatly enhance, you know, the outcomes and the impact of the program. If gender issues are addressed within your programming, then the likelihood of your program, you know, achieving its goals and objectives and cause a lasting and sustainable impact in your primary, secondary beneficiaries, then it is critical to consider gender. So I'll just pause for a minute and just check in terms of how we are doing. I know I have, you know, downloaded quite a lot in a short while, and I just take a breather now to just find out how we are doing. Is there any concept that is problematic? Is there any question? Is there any comment? Anything you can relate with? Again, make use of the chat section. But you can also unmute yourself and just say a word or two if you feel inspired to do so. I'll just take a minute on this slide, then we move forward.
Ready, so far there are no questions in the chat. So if anyone has anything to ask or to even react to, please unmute yourself and share.
Thank you very much, Nadia. So I'll just give another 30 seconds for that. Then we move forward. Okay. So as we are moving forward, and once again, should you have a comment, question, please feel free to make use of the chat section. We will be stopping intermittently just to check in. So at this point, we just want to take a little break, you know, and go into maybe 3 or 4 groups. And in your group work, very quickly, you only have 15 minutes. Choose any one of the 4 concepts that we have just covered. Choose whether you are in love with gender integration or gender equality or gender equity or gender transformation. Just pick one of those. And then in your group talk, chat amongst yourselves and give 2 examples of measures you are currently taking in achieving that concept. So if you picked gender equity, so 2 examples of how, of the measures you're taking, the things you're currently doing, you know, to achieve gender equity. And then also give examples that you face in implementing gender equity, if that's what you choose, all right? So just some examples, and we appreciate that there are programs that are currently, you know, running, and there are some organizations that are yet to formally join, but it would be good to hear your thoughts. So you have 15 minutes, and you might want to choose a rapporteur who will present in summary very, very briefly as we move forward. Why do we do this? This will help us ensure that at least some of the key concepts, you know, have sunk. And secondly, how you can begin to relate, you know, a concept, a theoretical concept with your day-to-day practical work in your current organization. And then also let's hear about some of the challenges you're facing. Gender as a concept is not exactly easy. And in some cases, however much you want to do it, there could be things, maybe externally, you know, that are hindering you, you know, from achieving the goal standard that you want. So again, I'm going to request Nadia to help me in assigning people into groups. And it is now 2:54. You only have 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, regardless of where you will have reached, you will need to converge. And then we'll just take a few minutes to hear from your rapporteurs and then move forward with the remaining slides. Nadia?
Okay. Okay, I'm opening the rooms. Everyone, we will put the assignment in the chat in the rooms as well.
Nadia. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the main plenary. How was it? Could we hear some quick reactions from the representative of room 1? If you could unmute yourself. Representative of room 1, please.
Okay, this is Elizabeth. So from room 1,
Mm-hmm.
our preferred context was equality.
Yes.
Yeah, so some of the ways that the examples or measures we use to promote these equalities are, one of them was staff development. This is where all staff members are given equal opportunities, where they can go for any training that they choose. It doesn't matter whether you are a male or a female. Another one, we also have gender committee within the organization, where we have both male and female. So during the committees, they discuss and then share with the broader population within the organizations. And then there are also WhatsApp groups for men and for women. So there are issues that they can discuss separately and then come together, then have a joint discussions. We also said that there's also including boys and girls in most of the programs, so that when discussions are done, we don't only select on girl child, as most of the programs have been concentrating on girl child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are some of the ways that I covered. Maybe in case I left something out, the group members are able to chip in. Can chip in.
Elizabeth, you covered.
Should I go to challenges or I?
Yes,
okay,
just finish.
Yeah, the challenges, some of the challenges are that men don't actively participate in most of the programs. And also when we have programs targeting both male and female, you'll find that majority will be female. because female are seen as people who don't have a lot of activities to do at home. I missed the last part that was shared by Pact. My network went off. Maybe if it can be added. Thanks and over.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Was there any member of that group who wanted to add something?
Okay. Okay, there is also the issue of men not really being very accommodative to trainings. So you'll find that you may have design a program for both male and female, but the people who end up coming are the female, the women, because they are much more accommodative to new things.
Okay. Thank you very much, room one. Oh, that's wonderful. Already you're doing deliberate, you're already taking deliberate steps in looking at ways in which you can mainstream gender equality, which was your choice. And in terms of your challenges, you're already beginning to see where some of the issues really are, you know, in terms of male participation. Perhaps this perception that program work is for women, you know, men feel like that's not their space. And that is where we all then need to come in to figure out what can we all do together, you know, to make the men feel that these spaces are also theirs as well. All right, thank you very much, room one. Could we hear from room two? Hello, can you hear me? Could we hear from room two?
You can just remember to unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Maybe the challenge is we did not pick the rooms, so we are not aware of the rooms when you say the room. Could you just briefly maybe reflect so that we're able to see who are in the room too? Please, thank you.
Nadia, could you share the list of who was in which room?
Well, the list is no longer there, but I can say that Wilfred, sorry to call you out, Wilfred was in room 2. So anyone that was in the room with Wilfred, this is the room we're talking about.
Okay, thank you so much. So our rapporteur is Ruben. So Ruben.
Ruben, in case you're speaking, you may need to unmute yourself.
Ruben was disconnected. It seems like he's not on the list in our meeting at the moment. So maybe someone else can represent on his behalf.
Fine. So I will share, and then I will welcome Wilfred also to share. So in our room, we picked gender inequality, and we were looking at areas where gender inequality could be existing, knowing or unknowingly. And we discussed about project designing, whereby sometimes an organization might think of including men and women in their activities, but the activities planned very early in the morning. But in my place where we come from, Siaya County, there's a challenge of water. So you'll find women going to fetch water very early in the morning. So sometimes when you design programs that require women's participation very early in the morning, you might not get them. So you might be practicing gender inequality unknowingly. Another one, again, we talked about budgeting. Sometimes as an organization, you have already programmed that probably you're going to train 10 people. And if your target populace were young women who are within the childbearing age, you should expect that 1 or 2 women will come with their children and maybe with assistant. So if this is not put into practice, sometimes we assume that everybody will be the way you had anticipated. We will be practicing gender inequality unknowingly. Maybe Wilfred, you can add.
Thank you, Pauline. Unfortunately, we lost our report one who took the notes in details. But the other thing I would want to share that we did talk about, the challenge, again, we are in CIA with Pauline. The challenge in the area we work in is in relation to access to water, where the girls, our target group ideally is working with youths and adolescents, and specifically the girls most times then would delay going to school in time because of having to go to fetch water very early in the morning while the boys prepare and go to school. So by the time they are able to bring water back at home, then they start preparing to go to school. They find themselves late. Sometimes they completely miss going to school. And in terms of addressing this particular gap, what we've been able to do in our programs is to try and provide, working of course with the stakeholders, with government, to ensure that there's access to water to homesteads and the villages and communities where we work, so that water can be accessed by the girls so that they don't get to go to school late because they have to go long distances to fetch water. So in terms of interventions, that's a particular example we did share in the group.
Thank you very much, folks in room 2, for highlighting some of your very specific examples in gender inequality. It's like the two groups took like the opposite, gender concepts, from each other. And yes, if girls have to, first of all, go to fetch the water because the water is far away and all that, then of course inequality is right there. The male counterparts had already reached in schools, and are already, moving ahead with their education. And also, like Pauline was saying, in terms of budgeting, if we are not gender aware, and make provisions for some of these, gender issues that may arise, then you might find a participant is kind of like left out, because if she's to come, she has to come with, someone with her child and someone to take care of that child. So thank you very much, all of you, for just going into the groups and thinking through some of those issues. I will proceed in the interest of time with the subsequent section. So moving forward, I wanted us to look a little bit at the 4 gender domains, and this builds on the concepts you've talked about, builds on the experiences that you've already shared. So we have the domain of norms itself, gender norms. We have the domain of gender roles. We have the domain of gender relations, and then we have domain of access insofar as gender differences are concerned. So norms, I think we already looked at this in terms of, the dominant ideologies of femininity and masculinity. And again, this varies from place to place, and we have to figure out, we have to take this into consideration in the geographic or cultural or socio-cultural context that you implement your work. We're already hearing that it's a norm for the girls and the women to go and fetch the water before they can even think of doing anything. That is, a norm, but it is also a role. at the same time. And then the norms also portrays, in some cases, like these are just examples, boys and men are as being the providers, being independent, being strong, being dominant, and portrays women as the opposite, being naive, being idle, being dependent, and must be given, must be shown, there's nothing they can do, for themselves. And it also shows like the sharp differences really between the roles, of men and women in terms of their decision-making, authority, access and control over resources. So it's a norm. In some places, it is even unheard of, for a woman to own land, things like that. So those are some of the gender norms you need to be aware about. In terms of gender roles, I think you brought this out very clearly in both groups. In your group work, we could clearly see, what is expected, of the men, what is expected of the women in terms of their responsibilities, the tasks, activities, and so on within the home, but also outside of the home. And we can also take it a little further and just think through that in terms of some productive roles, that include work that can be done by both men and women to produce goods and services that can be paid for. For instance, in the home, it is more like the woman or the girl's duty to fetch the water, because that is just for domestic use. No one is really paying her for it. But if there's a water that can be fetched, that can fetch money to it, like vending water, then you'll find that it is more of men who are doing that, than the women. If it is cooking outside the home for income generation, you'll find the men cooking. And I'm just giving, some examples. In terms of relations, this is critical. Because when you want to get to the transformative that we talked about earlier, remember, where men and women are actually operating from the same place, from the same plane, on the same table, then relationships come, very, very key. How comfortable our men are with women around, and vice versa. How comfortable our men and women are when they're sitting together, reasoning together as equals, on an issue that needs to be discussed. So these are some of the social, like relationships and nuances actually, that exist. You can find that, yes, you can bring both men and women into a meeting, but the women will sit on the other corner and the men will sit on the other corner, or the women will sit on the ground and the men are the ones to sit on the chairs. They're there, yes, together, but they're really not together. And here is where we also need to think about the issues around influence of power relations, in HIV prevention or in achieving, the WASH goals. And here is where, even if you think about the GBV that we talked about earlier, it's a real power, it's a relation issue. And for that particular case, it's a power relation issue. Access is really critical. When you think about the gender transformative, we want to be in a place where both men and women have equal access to opportunity, equal access to services, equal access to property, equal access to things like those, equal access to a service, or a right, that's provided for in law. So you find that there are some gender roles and relations that then shape how resources are allocated. In many cases, you'd find a woman, you're married somewhere and your husband has ancestral land. Yes, you can go and farm there and all that, but you cannot really own it. It's not yours, and they keep reminding you that this is not really yours. You can leave any minute. In terms of access to control over resources, and remember, resources here, we're even talking about time. A group said earlier that women are viewed to be the ones attending meetings more because they're idle. They have too much time, at their disposal to do nothing. So yeah, let them continue being the ones to go to this meeting. So the aspects of the domain of access insofar as gender is concerned is also critical when you think about it in terms of you achieving your programmatic roles. So let's look at some of the considerations for integration. So how then do we integrate gender? What do we need to consider if we want to integrate gender in WASH and HIV programs? And remember, gender integration can happen at any time in the life of a program. The gold standard is that it's factored in right in the program design, but in the event that was missed, that is still okay. You can always pause and figure out ways in which you can integrate the gender aspects into your programs. First of all, need to appreciate that, you know, gender is a cross-cutting issue that you cannot fail to think about, and that gender inequalities exist and they disadvantage men, women, boys and girls differently, insofar as their vulnerabilities to issues around HIV and WASH are concerned, and that they do not have the same access, you know, to health. They don't have the same access to WASH opportunities and information, protection, treatment, and prevention. So we need to think about what are you going to do in terms of gender equity to bring fairness, you know, into your programming angle, so that you can lift the women more for them to catch up, you know, with where the men are, but with the gold standard of ensuring that both men and women have that equal access. You also need to consider that there are differences as a result of biology. Now here we are coming into the sex aspect now, and physiology, and socially constructed gender norms and roles, and unequal power relations that are always constantly at play in whatever program activities or area, you know, that you come up, that you're doing. So we also need to look at gender integration, you know, continuum. We've looked at the considerations. So let's look at what are some of the 3 approaches in terms of the continuum, that if you meet the 3, or if you consider these 3, then you're already on your journey towards the transformative. First of all, as we had even mentioned earlier, there's the gender exploitative approaches. This is something that we as programmers need to be aware about. And in some cases, we are exploitative, or we are exploiting beneficiaries in a naive way without really knowing. You're not deliberately exploiting, but in some cases, you know, it results into an exploitation. And once we are exploiting, then we cannot move to where we want to be. Example is, for instance, taking advantage of inequitable gender norms and existing power imbalances to achieve, you know, your program objective. For instance, if a project expects women to participate in a time-sensitive development activity without compensation, you're not paying them, you want them to be volunteers forever, then you're just exacerbating the women's unpaid labor challenge that is already, you know, out there. If you very well know that in your context, women have to fetch water very early in the morning, and you're there putting your activity very early in the morning, you're in a way, you know, exploiting them. If you want them to come to your activity and you reprimand them if they don't, and if they do, then it means they're missing out on that other social thing that they needed to do. And when they leave your activity, they go home and then they find the trouble, you know, waiting for them. So those are just some examples of gender exploitative, you know, approaches, and these are unsustainable. This is not where you want to be. This is not even where you want to think of being. And if you're in this, you know, area, even without knowing, now you need to start thinking of how do you then move to become more gender accommodative. And if you're gender accommodative, this just means that you're recognizing and appreciating the role that gender norms and gender in itself plays, you know, insofar as achieving your goals are concerned, all right? And ways in which then you can make adjustments to compensate for areas that are lagging behind because of a gender norm, or because of a gender inequality, or a gender bias that may be existing. So when you're gender accommodative, you know, these are approaches that do not actively attempt to change the norm. You're more like staying with the status quo. You don't want to ruffle feathers. You don't want to go into unknown murky waters, but you try to limit any harmful impact, you know? So you're more like treating symptoms than addressing the root causes of issues. In some cases, depending on context, this is a good place to start. I'm not saying it's a bad place to start, but it's not a place to stay. Adopt gender accommodative approaches as a platform towards achieving the gender transformative. And in the gender transformative, here's where I think I've said enough, that we need, it's an approach that then ensures that harmful, gender norms are examined, those power imbalances, and relations between men and women are examined and mitigated to a point where men and women can sit on the same place, you know, and talk about issues, resolve issues, make decisions, plan together as equals. And in terms of even the, you know, distribution of resources, there's equality, you know, in that sense. So that is actually the gender transformative. I want to say that there are some places, if you start working like in a, say in a war-torn area where the law of the jungle is even there and the rule of the people who own the jungle is what works, then you might want to start with the gender accommodative, you know, get in, try and understand what's going on from a gender perspective, but try to mitigate and limit, you know, the harmful impact of the gender relations, but work towards moving step by step towards the gender transformative. If we look at the gender integration, we're still on gender integration in WASH and HIV. So how do you really do it? Remember, I had said the gold standard is to have this in the program design, in the program planning phase, even before you start. But in the event that you miss that, you can still, you know, it's a moving program. Implementation is a moving plane. You can still jump into it at any given time. So within the planning and proposal development stage, you know, so here is where, if you have the opportunity to do that, demonstrate, you know, in your proposal, gender as a cross-cutting issue. And this is a requirement now, you know, in many calls for proposals in this day and age. Take time and invest in understanding the technical and geographic gender context. In the place you're going to implement this program, how does gender play out in everything, you know? And what are the ways in which you can conduct an analysis? How do you do that gender analysis to get you to get the information or the evidence that you need, you know, to take a decision? And then gender, infuse, integrate, you know, your interventions that speak to gender. Make sure that everything that you're putting in there, put in a line or two on how it will differently or similarly impact men versus women, boys versus girls. In terms of the program design phase, all right? So you've already gotten your funding, you know, you're sure of getting your funding. Now you're designing the program, how you're going to do this program. Again, at this stage, do the same things, identify the gender-specific barriers and opportunities. And there are quite a number of tools that can help you do that, you know, that will help you achieve this, your program. Think through the SDGs and strengthen synergies between gender, health, and development. Gender actually is a cross-cutting SDG that touches on all the other SDGs, if you see what I'm saying. Identify and mitigate harmful norms already, you know, during the program design. Make provisions for, if we experience this is what we are going to do. And some of those are clearly articulated in your program design within your theory, your theory of change, or your implementation framework, if you like. And incorporate strategies that into activities and work plans. Make sure that in whatever activity you're doing, you have thought about the gender component into it. How does things play out differently or similarly between men and women? The implementation stage, this is stage 3. Here is where now you guys are. You're actually out there doing the thing that you set out to do. So as you're implementing, ensure that there's equal participation. From your group work, we already had that participation is a challenge, not necessarily equal as we want it to be. So do all in your power. Make the men and the boys feel comfortable to come. Reassure them that if you come, you will benefit in 1, 2, 3, 4 ways. If you sit together with women, this is how you're going to benefit. In terms of women participation, do your programming in such a way, schedule your meetings or trainings in a way and timing, you know, that makes sense to them, that will enable them, you know, and facilitate them to come. Take voices of marginalized groups seriously. You know, if you're in a meeting and it's only a few women who have come and they're saying things to you, think about it and take that seriously and mitigate around the issues that they are raising. Ensure balance in leadership and representation. I was hearing from the groups about In terms of staff development, the WhatsApp groups, the gender committees, you're already doing this. So just do that more and report the right way. The last stage in terms of programming is normally the monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning. So how do you integrate the how? So you need to disaggregate your data by sex, male, female, or other gender categories that is applicable to your program. Evaluate programs in terms of their impact on gender-related outcomes. This your outcome, what sense does it make to men and women as well? And how do the two, interact? Include indicators that measure changes in gender norms or relations, access to services, these kinds of things. Like, to what extent have your program enhanced access to HIV treatment for men compared to women? So you will be engendering your monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And of course, document and report. And that experience that you're learning, that challenge that you figured out how to circumvent, document the learning, for the benefit of other organizations who could still be going through the same. Remember, when we're talking about the continuum, the gender integration continuum, the gold standard was the gender transformation. How do we get to the gender transformation? How do we know that now you have reached the gender transformation stage? One, you need to understand and address how gender norms influence men, women, throughout their life course. Separate the two, it's never the same. You need to strengthen the girls' agency over decisions, their power to take decisions, their voices that we say must be taken as seriously, their participation and meaningful participation, in program activities or things that affect them, as well as build them up, build their knowledge, their confidence, their skills, and access to control, access to and control over resources. That may be a tough one depending on the context where you work, but there are steps that can be taken so that step by step, we are moving, both men and women, both boys and girls, to the gender transformation. There is need to work with and support boys and men to embrace positive masculinities and to promote gender equality. I think that was brought out in one of the groups. I think the first group, that we kind of tend to be blind and just always talk about the girl and the woman, insofar as it may be justified, but you can never address, say, GBV without bringing the boy and the man into the room. So what we are saying here is the gender transformation. That is the gold standard. We want to bring both boys and girls, no matter how difficult the topic is, on a place where they can operate, as equals in terms of opportunities and access. Consider boys and girls, men and women, in their diversity. When you're identifying and responding to their needs and interests. Not all women are the same. Not all men are the same. So get down and get dirty into digging and classifying even women further, in terms of, are they women in the urban, are they women, in the rural? Are they women of what socioeconomic bracket? Are they women of what age? So disaggregate them even further and meet their needs based on really who they are, almost at an individual level. Improve the social position of women and girls. This is critical. And this is where the gender equity aspect, the fairness part, comes in. If women and girls need to play catch up, make provisions for those, because once they catch up with the boys and men, then they will move together, like in one fast train towards achievement of program goals. And lastly, foster an enabling environment within your work communities, even within your offices as well, within the communities, within households, where all these gender aspects come to play. Do all in your power to ensure that the environment there is actually friendly. Now, elements of the gender transformative, and this is across both WASH or HIV programs, and in any program for that matter. So what are the elements? The elements would be, one, getting to the root causes of gender inequalities. Remember, we don't want to treat symptoms, we want to go to the root cause of the issues that are there. If you do that, you will be on your path, on the pathway towards achieving the gender transformative. Making women's empowerment and decision-making capabilities stronger or even strengthened. Think through about how to bring the women up. I think we cannot say that enough. Build a movement, you know, rally all your women, all your girls, and even the boys and the men, you know, into a movement, you know, that can challenge norms, you know, that can stand up for themselves, that can stand up and say, hey, enough is enough. And also to challenge all these things that don't go right, that are barriers towards achieving gender equality. You need to measure success and incorporate creative research. It can be in an ongoing way. It can be the baseline, midterm, endline strategy, whatever it is you decide. But make sure that your monitoring and evaluation and reporting components are engendered, so that at the end of the day, you're telling the world that this is how our efforts impacted men and women differently. We've already talked about engagement of boys and men, and you also need to think about the gatekeepers of social norms and decision makers. And in many cases, many communities, many contexts that we work in, it is actually the boy and the man. Even if you want to talk to a religious leader, it will probably be a man. You want to talk about the provincial administration, most likely it will be a man. A cultural or a traditional leader most likely might be a man. I don't know, but I'm saying that gatekeepers, quote unquote, of the social norms and decision makers need to be brought into the fore for you to achieve the gender transformative. And just one last note is that this may look a lot. No one can ever do all these things at a go, but if you are aware of them, and in your small little ways, in your everyday today activities, you're thinking about, you're aware of this and doing something about it and reporting it, before you know it, you will have reached the threshold of being classified as being the gender transformative organization. These are just examples that I'd want to skip, because this slide, this presentation will be shared to you, and just move a little forward into like examples of gender-related measures. And again, I'll just move very, very fast over this. Women's mobility. There are contexts where women are not allowed, you know, to move out of the home to do anything that can empower themselves or give them income, you know. So if you figure out ways in which to put in measures that can ensure that the men agree to their women to move out and go and do what they need to do, then you're moving towards the gender transformative. And of course, like, knowledge is very powerful for both boys and girls, knowledge of WASH, knowledge of HIV and AIDS, and there's a lot in there, you know, that needs to happen. Stigmatizing attitudes and discriminatory practices, you know, that need also to be addressed. Again, I want to pause here before we move to the last section where we look at some of the tools for today, and perhaps just say that, how are we doing? Ask how we are doing. Nadia, might there be any comment or question on the chat?
Nothing in the chat, unless anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask in person.
Yes, thank you so much, and really appreciate the detailed presentation regarding the gender issue. We really appreciate the fact that you've laid, as you have mentioned in your presentation, that gender is indeed becoming a sensitive issue in the way we incorporate our work and do our work. And I think, as you have also, you heard from our presentations of the rooms, yeah, we seem to be moving towards the right direction. And I've heard from your presentation, we are keen these days on also numbers and women, you know, and men and female and male, and also going to the details of also showing the age bracket, how many young children are we reaching out to, how many adults and things like that. However, I also realize that their gender, I think, is also quite affected by issues of culture, where, for instance, in a community, sometimes where we have our activities, you realize that when women come in, they leave actually, if you have benches, if you have chairs in the community, if you have, even chairs you've organized for people to come and sit on, women will come in and shun away from using the chairs, and then even prefer sitting on the ground. So you tell them, oh, you occupy these chairs. They'll be like, no, I think some gentlemen are still coming. So they will leave the chairs to be there. So I think as we do this, we also need to support the women more so, to also continue developing that, that kind of self-confidence within them. Of course, we know, we've seen women like you, women like Nadia, like Elizabeth, who are, empowered now, but those that are still in the rural communities, they still feel that kind of inferiority complex, which I think we need to build around them to promote their confidence and something like that, so that they don't again discriminate themselves, because there's a lot of self-discrimination. Otherwise, thank you so much for the presentation, and it's really bring out most of these issues.
You have actually highlighted a very critical issue that borders between low self-esteem or self-discrimination and respect, right? In some contexts or communities, it is a sign of respect that a child should not be sitting and an adult is standing, those kinds of things. And matters of respect is actually good side, of culture. However, when it comes to the development world, like what every one of you, do in the community, if men and women cannot see each other as equals, the gender equality in terms of opportunity. Remember, we don't want men to be like women. We don't want women to be like men. Men will be men, women will be women, and everyone playing their part. But we want a situation where if you're walking in, you are all equal. The minute the woman is sitting on the ground and the man is sitting, at a higher elevated level, that is a power relation issue just right there. Now, when we move into a community, we will find this, and we need to appreciate those and thank them actually, because that's all they know. And that's how they have been. That's how it has been, for centuries and centuries. And in some cases, I personally have experienced where if you try to make them sit together, either the men will not come or the women will not come. So at the end of the day, you want both of them to be there. So here is where now, as programmers, we use our intelligence, our emotional intelligence, and we use our creativity, and just say, okay, if this is a community where people must sit on the ground, then don't bring the chairs. If it's a community meeting, let everyone sit on the ground. Let the women carry the lassos, the pieces of cloth where they can put on the ground and sit, and let them share it with the men, and even you, the program person, sit with them on the ground. That way, slowly, step by step, pole pole, we will start infusing a sense of weight. All women and men can sit on the ground. All women and men can sit on the chair. So slowly by slowly, those kinds of things will happen. But when you see that happening, it also tells you as a programmer that you've got a lot of work to do. Because in such a community, when you want to start talking to them about equality in access to resources, or access to assets, then that has to be handled very carefully and very tactfully, so that then at the end of the day, you're not doing harm, to that community. You're not doing harm to these women. Sometimes you can make them sit, same as men, and her husband was there in the crowd. When she goes back home, that is reason for her to be beaten up, because why were you sitting on the chair like me, in that meeting? Do you want to be the same as me? Another way that can also work, these are just suggestions. And of course, what works in one place might not work in another. You might want to think about how you want to create a cadre of community leaders or people from the community you want to call like gender champions or gender change agents, whatever you want to call them. But they need to be people in authority, like a church elder who is a man, like a chief, you know, a provincial administration, a traditional leader, whoever it is, you know, out there. They don't have to be many, they can even be 5. So when you now transform them fast, you know, and once they are transformed, when you're having such meetings, especially for the first time, let the chief come. The chief can be male, female, and remember, this is someone in authority. And let the chief be the one to say that, you see, we are now moving forward as a community. We want our men and our women to reason together and think together. So can everyone sit on the chair? So if it comes from one of their own, sometimes it works better than if it comes from us, programmers who are in sometimes viewed as, you know, outsiders who are just imposing westernized, you know, culture on the local people. But the point that you raised is actually critical and a learning. You know, sometimes you try, you fail. Sometimes you try, you succeed. But to what extent are you documenting that your success and sharing it out with other organizations struggling with the same issue like you know, to learn from your experience, to adapt your example to their specific context. And by and by, we are going to see the change that we have all wanted to see. So I want to move, if there's no other comment.
There is one additional question in the chat that came in that says, how do we handle the attitude challenges?
How do we handle the attitude challenges? Again, there's no straight answer to that, but a good place to begin is trying to find out why the person or the community is holding that view or that attitude that is negative in the first place. Remember in the continuum that we talked about in how to ensure gender integration during your program proposal stage and even during your program design stage, you can do a quick assessment or a survey, very rapid, a survey to just get to know what the attitudes are, even before you do anything, all right? Get to understand that, hey, I'm moving into this community to start talking about, you know, water, to start talking about sanitation, and there is, the attitude is 1, 2, 3, 4. To be forewarned gives you an opportunity to be prepared and to prepare in advance. So once you understand where they're coming from with that, their negative attitude, then you sit down as a team and pose the question to them that, okay, so this is your attitude, but this is why this is not a good attitude. This is the kind of attitude that would cause you to move from point A to point B. What can we do together, you know, to move this, to change this attitude from here to here? And again, the gender champions and that kind of a structure can also help with attitude things. And once as many people are converted, if you allow me to use that word, then it will create like a herd immunity of some sort, or a herd community where the people who will continue to hold the negative attitude then will start looking like they're the ones who are outcasts, you know, or they'll start stigmatizing themselves. And by, through a behavioral change model, they can now, you know, slowly by slowly change their attitudes into what we want it to be. But also being careful to appreciate that not everyone should or will be with you in anything. You know, not everyone will ever accept an idea or an activity together, but move with those who have, move step by step, but you're doing this with full knowledge and awareness that there is this group who have this particular negative attitude. And if you manage to find one of them and transform them, change their thinking from that negative attitude to a positive one, and then unleash the person to go and be the one to deal with the rest like him or her, who are having the negative attitude. There's nothing as powerful as that. So I would push this issue of negative attitude back to them and say, hey, how do we deal with this? But I'd want to, as a programmer, be sure that first of all, I'm aware through an evidence-based process that this is the attitude that exists. This is just how bad it is. And this is the characteristic of it. These types of people are the ones who are holding this type of negative attitude. And then you plan around it from there. Is that okay? I would wish to move forward.
Yeah, no other questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. So when you talk about gender, anything gender, you want to think about tools, the how. Okay, so we've talked about gender integration, how. We've talked about gender transformative, how. We've talked about gender equality, gender inequality, gender bias, all these things. How do you even measure that? How do you, what do you do to ensure that you move yourself and your organization to that, place where you want to be? Now, in the world of gender, there are so many tools, like thousands of tools out there. And that's the beauty of Google. If you're stuck, if you just Google something, it's all there. But for the sake of this presentation, we had a couple of tools, but I will only go through one in the interest of time. So there's the gender analysis matrix of understanding the underlying influences on gender relations. Remember, we kept on saying, do not treat symptoms, get to the root cause of what the gender issues are within the context that you work in. Then there's also another tool that talks about formulating gender-based constraint statements. This is useful when it comes to the program design phase, as well as the proposal phase. When you want to even craft your own theory of change, you might want to have statements that are informed, not just statements from the sky, that are informed insofar as what are the gender barriers or constraints, but what are the opportunities as well. There are also tools that talk about consequences of gender constraints. There are those that talk about, how do you conduct your stakeholder analysis, that would ensure meaningful inclusion and participation, especially of women, all right? And also tools around integrating gender into needs assessment. If you're doing your needs assessment, how do you ensure that that process is engendered? How do you use, gender integration continuum? Remember, we talked about that, and gender strategies to design gender responsive programming, whether it is in HIV, AIDS, or in WASH, and also tools that talk about considerations of gender integration in program implementation and gender concepts into M&E. There are also tools that you can use to ensure that as you're continuously monitoring your program activities and periodically evaluating them, then you're sure that you're checking the right things insofar as gender concepts are concerned. Are you monitoring bias? Are you monitoring awareness? Are you monitoring all these inequalities, power imbalances, integration, and so on? So there are tools for those. So at this point, I just wanted to talk about gender analysis matrix, and it will cover these first three tools, because it is one process that leads into another. And this is one of those very basic, like first step type of activities that you need to do if you want to start your journey towards the transformative. You need to know the what. Before you get to know the how, you need to know the what, you need to know the why, then move to the how, and then move to the ultimate area or ultimate space that you want to be. And if you allow me, I will now stop sharing this presentation and move to a Word document where I want to just go through very quickly, just a sample of a tool. And I'm happy to do this again or make other additional follow-ups if there's a team that needs more help in terms of how to operationalize a particular tool. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, and also just a reminder for everyone, if you look in the chat, I have dropped a file. It's the same file, so you can download it and also open it and watch along with what the screen share presents.
Okay. So I'll try and move a little faster so that we can leave some time a little bit for Q&A. So this is the gender analysis tool. This is just one of them. And what are the steps in conducting gender analysis of your program? Remember, you can do this at any stage of your program. So step one is to identify the gender differences even before you do anything. In HIV, AIDS, and WASH, step two is to analyze underlying gender issues, the relations and inequalities. So you want to analyze that. And then you want to assess the consequence, the so what. After you analyze all this, so what? So when you analyze the consequences, it gives you then the opportunity to be able to come up with interventions, that then would help you to address the specific issues that you have identified. So in terms of step one, identification of gender differences, this is just a simple, very straightforward way in which you can do it, but these questions can always change depending on your on your context. So you can have the gender issue in terms of who does what and break it down by men and women. In terms of gender roles and responsibilities, what do men do, what do women do? In terms of what they do within the home or what they do outside of the home, all right? In terms of who owns what do men own, what do women own? In terms of control, what do men control, what do women control, right? In terms of like strategic interests. What is it that interests men, and what is it that interests women? What are those things, What are the barriers? What are the enablers for men, for women? Again, what are their priorities? And this will be more for you to break this down into the particular target group. All this you can do for the general community where you want to work, but there are some that you can now do priorities for the specific target group that you're targeting. You're not targeting all men, you're not targeting all women, but for those that you're targeting, what are some of their needs? What are their wish lists? What are their priorities? And then you just break that down between men and women. This will enable you, first of all, to understand and appreciate the differences between men and women in that community where you work. You move to another community, it may be completely different. And the gender issues, these are just suggestions. You can always add or delete, as applicable. Now, if we move to step two of analyzing the underlying gender relations and the inequalities. Remember, this is just an example, and this was adopted. This is an adopted picture. If you can see the reference down there. And this is just an example, of analyzing vulnerabilities of women and girls to HIV and AIDS. It can be anything in the middle here. It can be vulnerability even for men. It can be vulnerability of anything around WASH. So you are free to play around with what you're analyzing based on what your program focus is. So here, because this one talks about women and it talks about their vulnerabilities for HIV and AIDS, they looked at what the biological vulnerabilities, environmental vulnerabilities, the gender norms where the women really are in terms of values, the beliefs, expectations, and even some stereotypes, that then could put women and girls at higher risk. Analyzing the gender roles, we've already looked at this, in step one. And how do these differ between boys and girls, men and women? How do they differ in terms of roles at home and roles outside of the home? In terms of access and control over resources, we've already looked at this, including power relations between men and women. And you might want to, after you ask these questions, you might want to do an analysis in terms of partnerships. How does biological affect the interaction between men and women? That's what we mean by partnerships here. At household level, at community level, at government institution level, at international levels as well. This page just shows another way of doing just what we have said in terms of understanding the underlying influences of gender relations. This is another way to now make it practical. And you can look at the issue on one side, and these are just questions that I picked that depict HIV and AIDS, but you can always be free, to put in questions here that relate to your program. For instance, how do biological factors affect the differences in patterns of HIV infection and HIV infection and AIDS between women, men, boys, and girls. And then you subject that to a level of analysis of the partnerships we talked about at household level, community level, government, international level. So this is just a matrix that you can use, but the more you fill in here, the more it will give you a bit deeper understanding of what you're dealing with and what you're actually up against. And then you can put in mitigative measures. Now, step 3 on conducting a gender analysis is to now then assess the consequences for HIV prevention, consequences for WASH interventions, all right? So here, again, you get back to the gender-based constraint on opportunity or barrier or opportunity or challenge or opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it. And then you look at how that particular barrier or constraint and opportunity affect, men and women differently, and how it also affects your program in terms of achievement of your programmatic goals, all right? And then this column here talks about prioritizing gender-based constraints and opportunities. Once you have filled all this and subjected all this information against the environment that you're working in, against the norms that are existing, which you'll have already established in step 1 and step 2, against the gender roles and against all these things. So once you have filled this in, then as a team, you sit down and figure out now, looking deeper into your specific program, what are you going to prioritize? Are the environmental concerns more weighty than the norms, more weighty than gender roles, more weighty than access to and control over resources, or more weighty insofar as power and decision making is concerned? If you're talking about a HIV and AIDS program, for instance, the last one is critical. Access to, access to and control over resources is critical. Gender roles and gender norms are equally, critical. If you're looking at WASH, for instance, environment might be critical, and all these things are actually just as critical, but it would now depend on how you prioritize, because sometimes you might not do a response to everything all at a go. You might want to say, okay, we have a 3-year program. This is what we have established in our gender analysis process, and here's where we want to begin. So you want to action plan around that, but ensuring that in the course of the 3 years, then you will have hit, all the things that you wanted to do in terms of removing the constraints or mitigating around the constraints and enhancing facilitation of access to the opportunities that actually exist, and ensuring that you take advantage of them. And then in the process of doing this also here at number 4, here is also where you kind of say, what is it that you want to do? Once you prioritize, this is the challenge I want to deal with, this is the opportunity I want to enhance, all right? Then what are some of the specific activities, specific things that you want to do to ensure that here, that you achieve, your programmatic goals? What is it that you want to actually do to ensure that the opportunity in effect, has been put in place, but also the challenge or the barrier has actually been addressed. So in a nutshell, that is in very simple terms, how to conduct a very quick or rapid gender analysis. And like I said, I cannot say enough. This is a process that can be done at any stage of program implementation. No matter whether you're starting, whether you're in the middle, whether you're towards the end, you can always do this at any time. So I have stopped sharing my screen, and I want to turn it over to Nadia, just in case there's any questions or discussion or comments before we wind up.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you so much. Maybe you can return your video back now that you're not sharing and the connectivity is not so as important, so we can at least see you again. Thank you. This has been great. I just want to open it up to the room if there's any reactions, any burning questions, or even experiences that you would like to share before we wrap up for the day. Please unmute yourself and begin sharing. I think I will begin just to warm up the room. I am leaving today with a point of clarity that I don't think I've ever considered before, which is just your parting statement of just emphasizing that this can happen at any stage of the programming process, that it's not a lost opportunity if we have been running a project for a year or 5 years and we have missed integrating gender-related responses at the beginning stages, just to know that it can begin and that it requires creativity more than it does prescriptive steps or models. I think that's also really important because it tells us that it can and should look different wherever we're working with whoever our stakeholders are. So those are my big takeaways. I'll just open it up for others to share.
Thank you, Nadia. And actually, you can even include your beneficiaries in the whole gender analysis process. It's actually fun. You know, when you engage them, take a back seat, ask the questions, and do more of social listening, you will get all this information that might be the answer to why your project is not moving probably as fast as you wanted, why the men are not coming as many, why the women are not coming as many. So yeah, that's critical.
Great. Any burning contributions? Going once, going twice.
So before you close, Nadia, may I take this chance to appreciate the presenter for the good presentation. So this one has also, it was good. I was with my supervisee, Jael, and as they go to the field, we always have records of number of male who attended, number of females who attended. So I've also shared with her that those are some of the importance of differentiating the gender, the type of people who attended the program. From there, you can be able to analyze that during the programs, it's mostly attended by women or men. And that one can also give you a way forward on maybe finding out why most of the programs are only attended by women. So that was very key to me, and also the other ways of maybe promoting the men participation within the programs that we handle, because we also handle HIV and WASH, which are very critical, because also during the implementation or rehabilitation of the water points, you find that majority are women, and there's some work that cannot be done by women. You also have to include men. So we just look for other ways to involve men, or to bring them to participate like any other person within the community. It was very helpful to me, and I appreciate. Thank you.
Asante sana.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, I think on that note, I will close our meeting just with
Nadia, just before you close, there's a comment on the chat from Lusungu. I think he wanted to make a contribution.
Thank you for seeing that.
Lusungu, if you could unmute yourself. Okay. We can't hear him probably.
Do you want to try saying? I guess we can't hear you.
As she tries, Nadia, I'm seeing here that I'm going to read the campaign of encouraging more men so that we can see gender balance here. I'm seeing more women than men.
That's great.
Jeffrey.
Hello.
I can hear you.
Yes, finally.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Lusungu Nkandawire. I work with Foundation for Community and Capacity Development for Malawi, Kota District. I just wanted to thank the presenter. Actually, she has highlighted a number of points that have actually gotten me thinking of one of our projects that we're implementing. So we are into HIV projects where we are trying to bridge the gap on how people, beneficiaries, can access services from far to hard to reach areas. For quite some time now, I've been noticing that it's mostly the boys who come to correct condoms. And then when you look at the number of girls that come to correct condoms, when they show up, I hope anybody can hear me. Everybody can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when a girl comes to correct condoms, it actually rings into your mind, say, okay, this is quite strange. So it's like you're doing the gender inequality, the gender bias unknowingly. At the same time, you're also not looking at the root cause, because and then you have to sit down and say, okay, why are the girls not coming to correct the condoms? And could it be that the girls themselves are the gatekeepers? So if we need the gender transformation, we have to look at those angles to say, who is the gatekeeper? Why? What is the root cause why we're having this problem? Why are so many men accessing the services? Why it is open to everybody who can access the services? So it's a very good presentation, and I think it will be very helpful in our implementation of programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I think now I'll just go ahead and close. There's a few people who are just sharing their appreciation in the chat. Betty, thank you so much for spending this time with us. This hopefully is the first of many points of contact. I just want to reiterate to all of the Bloodwater partners, please, we're going to share the presentation with the notes, the video. We will also share the a fuller gender analysis tool that Betty has compiled for your use and for you to go through it and use it. And we'll also provide her contacts as well. So you all have resources through Bloodwater for organizational strengthening, and the area of gender, specifically gender and HIV, is one of the domains that we look at in the IDF process. So should this be a priority that emerges for you this year, please know that she is a resource to engage for technical assistance and support. So we hope that this is the forging of a beginning of a longer term relationship. And I just want to, on behalf of the entire Bloodwater team, say thank you, Betty, for your time and your expertise. It was such a joy to have you. For all of the partners who joined, current partners, future partners, welcome, thank you. And you will receive an email from me shortly after this with all of the resources and the video link to share. So on that note, I will close. I wish you all a wonderful week and a good evening.
Thank you very much, everyone. Looking forward for more engagements in the days to come.
Thank you, Nadia, and good evening, Nadia.
Good evening.